Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this Business Plus exclusive. I am Sidra Iqbal. Liberty, equality and fraternity. These three words, these are very three strong concepts that have a strong French connection. And in fact, an even stronger connection to today, that is the 14th of July. Some 223 years ago, 14th of July marked the beginning of the French Revolution and in fact marked the beginning of a new era for human rights and the governance system. And today, to commemorate this, as the National Day of France, we're bringing to you an exclusive conversation with the Ambassador of France to Pakistan, His Excellency Philippe Thiebaud. Hello, sir, and thank you for having us over.
Bonjour, assalamu alaikum, good afternoon.
And many congratulations on the National Day of France.
Thank you very much indeed, and we are very happy today to celebrate the 223rd anniversary of the storming of the Bastille, which is our national day since then. As you mentioned, liberty, equality, fraternity are the motto of France and are still principles and values which are very vivid and very vibrant ideas, not only in France but worldwide. We had in France very recently in May and June presidential and parliamentary election, and most of the debate we had proved to be dealing with the implementation of those principles, of those values, and those values have been universal values not only for France but for many countries, for governance worldwide, which are encompassed now in the UN Charter on Human Rights, and we are very proud that those values were a source of inspiration for many countries.
Ambassador, indeed, these are going to be inspiring concepts for years to come. And what I would be really interested in knowing, if I'm not wrong, this is your first National Day in Pakistan.
Yes.
So how do you see these values being reflected in the Pakistani society?
Well, I think the Pakistani society is obviously a very vibrant society, and Pakistan has been very active in promoting a democratic process over the past years. France, like its partners within the European Union, has been very supportive of this democratic process, and we are quite convinced that the debates going on here in Pakistan within the civil society, and more especially within the young people, which are the huge majority of the population in Pakistan, are of course the very basis for the success of this democratic process in the country.
Ambassador, in my experience of actually interacting with the various diplomatic missions in Pakistan, it is noticed that very often the ambassadors who get posted to their embassies and commissions in Pakistan are the ones that have a lot of experience while serving their embassies in the Middle Eastern countries or other Muslim countries. But when I look at your profile, you've spent time in Mexico, in US, in Korea, but in none of the other Muslim countries. So what is your understanding of the Muslim culture and the diversity we see in Islam?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, I have a rather diverse experience worldwide, not necessarily in Muslim countries, but I think the experience I had in the United Nations, I was posted there for 5 years, helped me in being in touch with representatives of 192 countries by that time, and quite a large number of them were representing, of course, Muslim countries, not only in Middle East, but in Northern Africa, in Asia, in Southeast Asia. So even though I am not, and I do not pretend to be an expert on this part of the world, nevertheless, I think I have a rather global picture of what are the differences, what are the specific features of Muslim countries worldwide. And I think we should not forget that Muslim countries, like Indonesia, for example, are playing a key role nowadays in world affairs also. So we have not to focus only on Middle East, but also have the global vision of countries like Indonesia, Pakistan, which are playing more and more a pivotal role in international affairs.
And of course, it cannot be ignored that in France itself, you have the highest Muslim population in the whole of Europe. Now, just like Pakistan, I often see the French society and the government being criticized for issues that makes the headline in international news, but I'm sure there's much more to it. Again, reflecting on the same issue of Islam and Muslims in France, one of the things that particularly keeps propping up in the news is the headscarf issue. What is your take on the subject?
I think the first point, and you just referred to it, is that we have a rather large Muslim community in France, more than 5 million people living there on a population of 68 million people. And I think the basic value and the basic policy has always been to have an integration of these communities in the French, among the French people. It has always been the basis for our policy. France is a secular state. It's not something new. It is an heritage of the French Revolution, and by 1905, more than 1 century ago, we passed a series of laws separating states from the religion, which means that all the religions, of course, are welcomed in France, but it is a private matter.
Yes.
It's not something which is interacting with the government or with public policies. And it has absolutely nothing to do with one religion or another. It's a system which is implemented with regard to all religion, all beliefs. We have been trying in this context to have a proper integration of all the communities living in France, and I think the huge majority of the Muslim population living in France is now integrated properly in our system. We have more than 2,400 mosques, for example, in France, which is generally not so well known. We have big mosques which were constructed in a recent past and are now offered for the prayers. So we are doing all what is needed in order to accommodate in a secular state.
A diverse, integrated society is something that all countries are aiming for. But Ambassador, if I may probe you a little further, it was rather unfortunate that back in 2005, when there were riots, there was a few of the media agencies that perhaps labeled it to be Muslim riots in France in 2005. Do you think that was misrepresented?
Well, I think basically, to try to answer more globally to your question, regarding the question of the respect of tradition, I think once again to try to dispel of misunderstanding regarding the veil, for example, the hijab, it is perfectly authorized in France, and if you go to any French city, you can see that hundreds or thousands of young French Muslims are wearing a veil without any problem or without any challenge. Which is prohibited in France is the niqab, or the complete concealment of the face, which in our view is in contradiction with our basic values, and which is absolutely not a requisite by the religious authorities, the Muslim religious authority in France, which do consider that this concealment of the face is not a religious requirement. It's a cultural fact in some countries, but it's not a basic and religious principle. So it's the only prohibition is the concealment of the face, because for us it is in contradiction with our basic principle and with the dignity of women. And the huge majority of the Muslim population is supporting this prohibition.
So you feel this prohibition actually allows the Muslim community to integrate better with the French tradition, and it has certainly borne fruit, because we see in the latest identity indexes a lot of the French Muslims see themselves more as French than rather just Muslims.
Yeah. And I think we have more and more French people from Muslim religion becoming members of National Assembly, becoming minister, being involved in politics, being involved in society, in culture, in intellectual activities. So this is basically what we are looking for, to have this integration. This being said, we have in France, like in other countries, some people trying to antagonize communities. And we are fighting against this antagonism because it is in contradiction with our basic values and principles.
Going back to the other question, again, lots and lots of great efforts being made to integrate the society better, to actually celebrate diversity, but at the same time have a unique French culture that must be kept intact. Going back to the 2005 riots, that being labeled as Muslim riots, your take on the subject, sir?
Yeah. I think on this question, we are facing in France, like in many European countries, an economic slowdown and recession. And we have, in some suburban areas, concentration of people who are, by the time being, unemployed or facing difficulties to find a job. So I think the situation we've been facing in 2005 was much more a situation of integration on the work market, and integration of the society by people living in those areas, than so-called Muslim riots, which were absolutely not true, and I think a large number of the people that were participating in those riots were not Muslims or from other religions. They were just people trying to seek better integration in the economic and in the society.
I think it's important to keep the dialogue and the engagement going. Sometimes the message that comes across from the European Union is perhaps to quarantine the problem, and the problem in particular being their dealing and their understanding of the Muslim community. Now, a completely different tangent altogether. You mentioned and you touched upon the economic slowdown, and I noticed that Pakistan and France, in the case of Pakistan, France happens to be one of those countries where the balance of trade is in our favor, at least from the figures of 2011. How do you see the trade relations of the two countries going forward, and where do you see the opportunity?
Well, I think first of all, we certainly, as France, as French companies are concerned, we certainly see a great potential in Pakistan. It's a country of 180 million people, in a very near future more than 230 million people, and so it is obviously an emerging market, and we cannot do but increase our economic and trade relationship with Pakistan. As you mentioned, the trade relationship developed over the past years very steadily, and in 2011, like in 2010, there was a trade surplus for Pakistan. Basically, Pakistani exports to France are developing really at a two-digit rate every year, and last year increased by more than 20% to France. Those exports are focused on textile, on leather goods, and on some other consumption goods. And I think French companies are very happy with the way they have developed their relationship with Pakistan. We have some structure. The Pakistani Business-French Alliance is one example for those structure, where we have now more than 180 companies working together with the view to further increase relationship. On the other hand, we have here in Pakistan more than 40 large French multinational companies investing in Pakistan, developing their activities in Pakistan in different areas. It can be oil, it can be retail, it can be cosmetics, it can be pharmaceutical, it can be services. So we are trying to be present in all sectors of economic activities here in Pakistan, and in investing further in the country, because we are quite convinced of the huge potential of the development of the Pakistani market.
And the huge youth component of the population, if I may add. And for the viewers' interest, there are more than 40 multinational companies originating from France right now operating in Pakistan. Ambassador Thiebaud, I also noticed in your profile that you've served on very important positions in the science, research, energy and technology linked departments in France, and that is definitely one area where we can see more collaboration, especially when it comes to education and research. Pakistan happens to be the 7th largest producer of engineering graduates in the world. Where do you see them coming together? Is there room and opportunity for more collaboration?
Definitely there are rooms for more cooperation. France is the second destination for Pakistani students at the level of master and PhD, and we are trying to develop this cooperation in the area of higher education, and we have by the time being more than 600 Pakistani students at the level of master and PhD in France, and we are trying to develop this cooperation in all areas, basic sciences, but also social and human sciences, new technology, and we are very eager to have this cooperation because we are quite convinced, first of all, that it is a requirement for the development of Pakistani economy, and that those students will be the best ambassador for cooperation with France in the near future. So what we are doing nowadays is really to establish the basis for future cooperation and better understanding between the two countries.
Celebrating the National Day away from home, what do you miss about France the most today?
You know, I benefit from such a warm hospitality by Pakistani people, Pakistani friends, that I am not really missing France. I think, well, we are trying to have some French cheese for the celebration of our National Day, which perhaps are a bit difficult to find here in Pakistan.
Well, true. I was actually rather pushing for an invitation, because one thing I noticed, one thing that Pakistanis love the most is, of course, food, and that you can see in the variety of cuisine and eating opportunities that you get in Pakistan, be it Thai food, Mongolian, Spanish, Italian, it's all available. I can't help but notice that there are not many French cuisine offering restaurants in Pakistan. Are you going to do something about that?
We are trying to do something about that. For example, we organized recently in Lahore a French week where we try to promote some French cuisine also, and I have the feeling that there are some initiatives taken here and there in Pakistan in order to have a promotion of French cuisine, and we are certainly going to be supportive of it. I share your point of view that cuisine is part of a tradition, it's part of a culture, it's part of a civilization, and we will certainly spare no effort to have better understanding here in Pakistan of what is French cuisine, even though some of the basic ingredients are perhaps difficult to find in Pakistan, but we will try to.
We're not really mentioning French fries here, are we?
No.
Ambassador, another thing that we've certainly taken lead from Paris and from France in particular is the boom of the fashion industry in Pakistan. Now we have sometimes even contradicting and colliding fashion weeks happening in Pakistan. And one of the key exports of Pakistan to France would also be textiles. What is your opinion? How do you see the fashion industry in Pakistan booming? And is that the step that we should be taking forward further?
Certainly, I think we have very good cooperation between some Pakistani design or fashion institute and some French institution. I visited, for example, 2 months ago Lahore, and I could see how dynamic and vibrant are the different institutes, same in Karachi, where you have so many schools, so many talented students, and it is really a booming industry and a booming activity here in Pakistan, and we are of course very interested in supporting, in developing exchanges of students in this area, and also in developing exports of Pakistani products, of Pakistani goods in this area. Some French fashion companies are now importing embroideries, textiles, creation, which are realized here in Pakistan, and I am quite convinced that it is an area where we can do more in the creativity, in the institute, in the training, and of course in the export of textiles.